Hello, welcome back to those who've been here before, and welcome to those who haven't. Before I begin my video, I got to do the disclaimer thing. I'm not a doctor, not a lawyer, not a money man. Generally speaking, if you're looking for advice, shrug off. You'll find none here. Why do I say this? I'm nobody to you. And with that, on to the subject. So, we like to believe we live in the United States, and generally that's how our nation was laid out, to where we had a bunch of states who got together and decided they'd run our country by one set of basic rules, okay? And not basic rules for the people, basic rules for the government. It's one of the few governments in the world that's ever existed where the rules weren't for the people. Me, you, Joe Schmo, lawyer, doctor, beggar, thief. These rules were not meant for us. You often hear we're a nation of laws. Well, generally our initial laws were against the government. The Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They don't say anything about what we have to do. They're not laws that we have to obey. They're laws that the government has to obey. And part of those laws is the processes in which they govern us. Okay? Generally, there's a blueprint or a list of laws laid out in the Constitution, defined in the Bill of Rights. Now, at the same time, our forefathers were pretty smart cookies. They said, well, we can't write every law for every state because every state is different. And I mean, when they got together in the first Continental Congress, it was the differences that created the rules. They respected the differences and wrote the laws accordingly. Matter of fact, the differences are solidified with the statement that the laws not in the Constitution are up to the states, i.e., states' rights. Now, generally speaking, the states have the rights to put out a good number of laws, and they do. But generally speaking, it's the laws in the Constitution and Bill of Rights that restrict the states and our federal government for doing things that would stymie our liberties, okay? Even more so than our rights, okay? Now, don't get me wrong, there's not a Bill of Liberties, there's a Bill of Rights. Yet at the same time, liberty was one of the main causes for the formation of our states. Or not our states, I'm sorry. Our country. Okay? Our country, the United States of America. So, as much as that is just an awesome idea, and for the most part, works really good, it's all been turned to crap. Now, don't get me wrong, states still have rights and this and that, but the states' rights, the rights of the individuals in the states, and the liberties of those individuals have been squashed. Liberty? Man, we don't have much liberty today compared to what we had 10 years ago, and before that, and before that, and before that. If you don't believe me, try and do something without going through your county or your city or your state. That has to do with your own property. I mean, generally speaking, you don't own your property. The community owns it, and if you don't pay your taxes, it can be confiscated, basically taken by the county or maybe the state. I think it's the county. I don't know. The particulars like that, I don't really give two shakes about. It can be taken. So, that kind of points us to something. A government that is immensely powerful. Okay? Now, state governments are powerful. County, city, they're powerful. Hell, even your HOA has power over you. But the worst part is the federal bureaucracies, which have the most power to govern. Generally speaking, not even generally, literally speaking, the federal government, how can you put it, was organized in a way that would have agencies that would run certain aspects of governance. Okay? And basically it's because the executor, our president, obviously could not have his hands in all of these different pies. So he had different agencies, bureaucracies, to go ahead and basically set, define, and create rules. Now these rules, by nature of the agency's authority, are laws. I mean, all right, good example. Fish and wildlife. Okay? If you go out and you go fishing and you catch a fish an inch under what is set as the standard, you could get in pretty big trouble. If it's an inch over, you can get in pretty big trouble. Now, that's an agency of the states. Okay, it's not a federal thing. Each state has their own kind of thing like that. And generally speaking, Florida is pretty closely maintained by this agency. Now, our state itself, our representatives, our senators, okay, are not the ones creating this law. The federal government didn't create this. And I'm sorry, I said law, didn't I? It's not a law. This rule with the power of law. They didn't do it. They didn't create it. It's not them. It's a state agency, a bureaucracy. Federal governments are even worse. Okay? EPA. If they decide there's, I don't know, something that's protected on your property, even if it's a minuscule amount of them, they can have authority over your property. And honestly, even for a short period of time, there was the United Nations Agenda 21, I believe it was, or 2020 or something like that. Anyhow, one of the United Nations agendas that took away the ownership of any pooled, gathered, collected, or basically natural source of water on your property. It literally meant that if you had a rain puddle that wasn't yours, you couldn't mess with it. Not by law. Okay? Now, Congress didn't say, oh, well, we're going to do this, or oh, well, we're going to do that. No. An agency. Now, in this case, it was the United Nations, which is not a federal government agency, but the EPA was exercising that. Okay? There's a number of different examples I can give you, but the truth is, a government agency can make a decision for something, and it's law. What was one recently? It was, there's I think there's a trigger mechanism for guns or something like that. It's like a reactive trigger, and you can basically hold the trigger at a certain point, the trigger bounces in your finger, and when it bounces, that's basically, it will shoot. Works, from what I'm told. I've no experience. I'm not really a gun guy. But it works kind of like a automatic weapon, that it will continuously fire until you let off the trigger. Now, I'm okay with having an automatic weapon. Yes, I understand the carnage it can create, okay? But I also understand the deterrence it can create. Because, buddy, you lay down 30 shots within a second, I think pretty much everybody who's assaulting, attacking, or invading your space is going to beat feet, or at least back the F up pretty darn quick. Now, you say to yourself, well, okay, those are bad things. And I'm sure there's people out there who agree with that, probably a lot. But who made that law? Is it a law? No. No, it was never a law. Generally speaking, for things to become laws in our nation, at the state level, it goes through the House, the Senate, or at least in Florida where we have House and Senate chambers. So it goes through Congress. Congress puts it together, presents it to the governor, and the governor either signs it or vetoes it. This allows for a bit of due process. You know what I mean? It goes through committees, it goes through research. I mean, really, and people go up and plead their case. I don't know if you've ever watched any of the proceedings. But during committees, people plead their case, pro and con, and that influences the law. Now, not completely. There's many things that influence the law, but it does. It influences the law. So the federal government pretty much works in the same exact way. In the federal government, you're basically passing laws for the nation. In the state government, you're passing laws for your state. But the thing is a federal bureaucracy doesn't need that. They can just willy-nilly decide you can't. I'll give you a good example of a couple of them that they tried and it did not work. So the president that we have now, which is pervy Uncle Joe, creepy old man that he is, let alone I think he's totally lost his noodle. But anyhow, so creepy Uncle Joe, and generally speaking, he had told a couple agencies to do things. Now, these agencies don't have the power of law, but they have the power of regulation, which is even better than law because it needs no processes other than the organization all of a sudden go, yeah, we like that idea, let's run with it. So one of the ideas that they had was during the COVID issue was that if people can't pay their rent, they shouldn't get kicked out of their houses. First of all, it's not their houses if they're renting. It's somebody else's house. And they're paying to live there. Well, if they can't pay, they have no right to be there. It's a contractual thing. But apparently they decided that didn't matter and they were going to make that regulation. Now, it went up in front of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court said, no, you can't do that. Now, the Supreme Court is the last word on any law in America. Okay? They judge whether it's within the Constitution and Bill of Rights, and if so, then it continues as law. If not, then it's defeated and it goes back through a bunch of rigmarole to try and become a law. Well, the president basically said, well, we don't care what you say, we're going to do it. And the CDC was the ones that they had enact this regulation. Now, what authority does the CDC have over your property or your persons or anything? None. There's no authority in that case. But magically, because the president decided and then the bureaucracy decided, They did it. They kept people in their houses to the point where the people who were renting them out were losing money. And their thought was, oh, well, we have to keep these people in their homes. Well, first of all, you kept them from working. And that's why they weren't able to maintain the rent payment. Also, that was driven by bureaucracy and not by law. So generally speaking, who was in charge? Congress wasn't. You could say the president was, but generally speaking, the president had to go through agencies to get things done. If you have to go through an agency to get something done, then you're skirting the normal processes. And that's part of what's wrong with America. We gave up the right to govern ourselves by electing officials, senators, representatives, which we're never supposed to be electing senators anyhow. That was supposed to be the states would pick their people and send them up there, but somehow or another that got changed, and now we vote for senators. It's not necessarily a good thing. Look at it as you will. I don't see it as a good thing. But generally speaking, they're toothless. Oh, don't get me wrong. Don't get me wrong. They pass thousands of laws and regulations every year. Literally, look it up. All right, thousands. So you have them passing thousands of laws. You have your state passing thousands of laws. And you have your county probably passing hundreds of laws. So we get tons of laws from them every year. They don't repeal any, they just add more and more. Hence, goodbye liberty. But at the same time, they go through the process. It could be brought to light because most of it's recorded and most of it's public. But a bureaucracy doesn't need that. They just decide, boom, there you go, it's a law. I'll give you a good example. So here in Florida, we have what's known as the gopher turtle. It's actually a tortoise. We just call it a turtle because a bunch of knuckleheads called it a turtle, and there you go. Okay? It's a tortoise. So anyhow, you're not allowed to handle them. It can be up to a $10,000 fine for handling them. If they're on your property and in a spot where you wish to build a home, you can't build your home there. Unless you're a contractor, and usually one of good scale, then you can move them. Okay? Generally speaking, they'll move on their own. You just block up their hole, but that's between us. No harm comes to them. They just find a different place. So generally speaking, you say, oh, well, it's good we protect the gopher turtles. Honestly, dude, they're freaking everywhere. All right? Certain times of the year you see them more than others, much like any other creature. But generally speaking, they're freaking everywhere in Florida. I mean, everywhere. Dude, there's no question they're everywhere. Now, they used to be consumed. They were part of the food group of locals, much like manatees, much like the, one of those stupid birds with a red thing on their head, sandhill cranes. Okay, they were part of the normal food system back in the day before we had the major can get everything globalism kind of thing going on, and people had to fend for themselves quite a bit more. So generally speaking, it's illegal to mess with them. It's not a congressional law. It's not a federal law. I don't believe it's a state law, but it's EPA. I believe it's EPA. I mean, it could be under something else. Do you know how, and thank you, NPR, for telling us the truth about crap every once in a while. Do you know how they decide about the condition, the situation for the gopher turtles? 30 acres. That's it. One 30-acre plot in the whole state is how they decide. Now, I don't know if they take into consideration the impact of varying factors around those 30 acres, i.e., development, various migration patterns of certain animals, because a lot of animals migrate and we don't think nothing of it. It's not just because of the construction. It's like people don't realize Florida Panther's got like a 50-mile spread that it lives on. That's 50 miles. That's 25 from center point out in each direction. Okay? 50 miles. I guarantee you they're eating gopher turtles. How do I know? Because I've seen eating gopher turtles in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, we got panthers here. But generally speaking, how can they judge the whole state? And what right do they have to judge such an immense state on 30 acres? Well, they've got the law of government. And because they're the government, they can make the rules. And because they make the rules, they're now laws. Don't believe me? Go ahead, grab one up and walk into a police station and go, hey, anybody want one of these? I'm cooking it up later, and see what happens. Okay? You're pretty much going to have some issues. So with that, I want you to think about this. Can we take back the power granted to us by our forefathers to govern ourselves? Can we take that back from all these alphabet agencies? I mean, dude, they just, anytime they want, just make up a law. BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is grabbing up more and more land. How? Oh, they're just making up rules. Congress isn't saying, okay, well, this is what we decided and we're going to do this. No. Basically, maybe the president might mention to somebody in an agency, and next thing you know, that agency goes, oh, we've got a great idea. Let's do this. BLM actually tried that some years ago and got put down pretty quick and pretty hard. I actually love that. And I'm sorry we don't see more of it. But check out the Bundy standoff. Yes, Bundy like Ted or Peg and Al. Okay, Bundy. BLM Bundy standoff. Check it out. BLM went and decided they weren't going to allow these people to graze their cattle on land that they had a contract from the 1880s that said that family could graze on those lands pretty much forever. Generationally, they can continue to use those lands. I think there's agreement that they have to maintain it within a certain aspect. But the federal government just went in, took down their fences, chased their cattle off, and even got to the point where they got into armed standoff. Now, fortunately, this was not far after the Tea Party movement, and enough proud, patriotic Americans were willing to stand up to the government. I'm sure they knew that they could go to jail for a long period of time. They could be shot and killed without recourse. Many different aspects of their life could be ruined. And at that, the Bundys themselves faced quite a bit of legal litigation. When it went up in front of the higher courts sided with them. Now, you would think, well, yay, we beat BLM. No, they just started creating different regulations to be able to skirt what was said to be legal. Okay? So in other words, it wasn't the choice of the people to set rule or regulations. It was the government. Not the federal government as in Congress and the president and the proceedings as such. A bureaucracy. God, we see it with taxes constantly. We see it in so many places. So how do we defeat the bureaucracies. Well, a big part of that is voting for a certain mindset, certain aspect. The other part of that is backing those people up, much like the Bundy situation. Somebody has to take a stand, and we the people need to back them up. Now, taking a stand does not mean grabbing guns and confronting your government, okay? Sometimes it's as easy as a lawsuit, okay? And I say easy as a lawsuit. There's nothing easy and nothing cheap about a lawsuit. But a lawsuit does, usually when against the federal government, make news. And this news can sway people. We're kind of seeing it with what's going on right now with a lot of the government bunk, baloney, malarkey, whatever word you want to use. You know where I'm going with it. How do we get the people who will vote against it? Well, first of all, don't buy into the hype and hyperbole. Second of all, ask these people questions. Not this stupid questions. Oh, what are you going to do in climate change? What else? One of the stupid ones. Oh, women's reproductive rights. You know, the one where we terminate the reproductive process in mid-process and call that healthcare. Yeah, that's just an awesome one. Which you can kind of see where I'm starting to lean on that whole thing. Generally speaking, though, we don't. We don't research anything. We don't look up anything. We buy the status quo sold to us through the media and the politicians. And generally speaking, how can I put it? The small group of people with the big voice. Okay, it's not that they're powerful or anything. It's the squeaky wheel. Okay, so generally the squeaky wheel gets our grease. We get regulations, and we get it stuck to us. Okay, so we need to start asking better questions of these politicians. What are the downside of these regulations? Make these people point out the downside. All they ever say, oh, this is so good if we do this, and if this is so good if we do that. Good example is pouring out money to people who have kids that don't make X amount of dollars. Oh, that's sold as such a good thing. It really is. And don't get me wrong, for commerce sake, it is, because those people pretty much they piss that money up quick. Those people aren't putting that money away for college. They're not squirreling away for this and that. They go on expensive vacations. Inexpensive only in the matter of fact that they could not normally afford it. They go and buy crap. Just stupid stuff. You know, they'll upsize their 55-inch big screen to a 72-inch big screen. They'll update their Xbox that's 5 years old and still works fine to the most brand new one. And of course, all the new stuff that gets it, they'll add subscriptions to things that they don't really need. Basically, they'll piss it up. Okay? And it's kind of understandable, and I believe to some degree it's meant to work like that. So this way the government can say, oh, look how good the economy is, spending is up. Yeah, because you threw thousands of dollars at numbskulls that just burned it up in the commerce real quick instead of saving it, where if every year you put that money away in an interest-bearing account, especially now that the rates are higher, that by the time your kid was ready for college, there you go. Or you could set up in a college account. If we had healthcare savings accounts like we used to, and how that all used to work before the Obamacare regulation that now controls our healthcare system, you could basically not have to get insurance. I mean, because think about it. If you you're probably not spending $2,000 a year on your kid, on medical. So put it away. And if you have 3 kids, that's $6,000 a year. You put that away. Well, in 2 years you got 12 years, or 12 grand. In 3 years you got 18 grand. See what I'm saying? But people don't do that. Okay? But at the same time, we're sold so much of that, and that's how we get the people who allow the bureaucracies to run our nation. Okay? And they don't have ill intent. They have, I'm sure, good intention. Would I say the best intentions? No, because if you're not considering the consequences, you don't have very good intentions. But nonetheless, it's the agencies that now have to enforce these things. Good example, when Obamacare was, how can I put it, codified by the Supreme Court, and Roberts had it right. He said, you don't like it, vote. And stu-nods and knuckleheads did not. They went with the hyperbole and the platitudes thrown at us through the media and a bunch of politicians that go, hey, I'll do this, I'll do that, the other guy's a bad guy, I'll do what he's not doing, blah, 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 blah. No specifics, no concern for telling you what's good or bad. If we start voting for people who will actually talk about the issues, not just in good and bad, but in cause and effect, both good and bad, maybe we can sort this out. If we start electing people who say, hey, these bureaucracies are crushing us, okay? The education system is a fine example of that. We've got a terrible education in most states, and we're lucky here in Florida we have a very good education system. It's not the best in the world, but it's one of the best in the country. If we could get people who get these bureaucracies under control, maybe we could go back to living in the United States of America instead of the United Bureaucracies of America. This is something I talk about a lot with people. Most of them agree. Most of them understand. Most of them will not do a damn thing about it, including the way they vote, because most people are one-issue voters. You know what I mean? Oh, well, I disagree with their stance on this, so I'm not voting for them, even though I like everything else about them. And that's part of why we get such crappy politicians. But seriously, vote for people who want to reinstate the old system of the federal government writes rules, not the agencies. Get these agencies on their heels. Various ways they can do it. Economics, law. But let's start cutting the legs out from under these bureaucracies. It's necessary. They're ruining our nation in so many ways. I mean, really, really are in so many ways. And of course, it doesn't help that America is so apathetic and so, oh, well, my vote doesn't make a difference. No, dumbass, it's a collective voting that makes a difference. Go talk to your friends, get them to join you, and then you have 2 votes instead of 1. You know what I'm saying? So generally speaking, I hope I made my point. We need to sort out these bureaucracies to sort out our government. Okay? We sort out our government, we'll sort out much of our issues and maybe start bringing back some liberty and the exercise of our rights, our free exercise of our rights. Well, either with that, I'm well beyond swapping machines at the laundromat, so I've got to bail on you. If you've spent the time here to listen to me ramble, I appreciate it. I really do, because your time is the one thing you have that you can't get back. So if you've taken some of yours to listen to me, thank you. Thank you very much. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and bail so I don't get these people pissed off because I'm holding up a machine. Alright, so with that, here goes the upload, and hopefully it won't take too long. Alright, so if you like what I got to say, or my ramblings, or whatever, click like. if you want to hear more of it, click subscribe. If any things I tell you, any things I talk about, maybe share them. Not necessarily a bad idea. And honestly, if you want to know when I post stuff, do the notification thing. So you guys do all that, and well, I'm going to go do laundry. Yay, laundry day. So with that, we will talk to you later. Still waiting on word back from when I can have those people in the trades that I want to talk to, and I don't want to do any other ones till I get this. So any other possibility is put on hold. Okay, well with that, I'm bailing out, and I will talk to you later. Thank you.